Yeah.
Imagine the guy recording that up.
Yeah. It's funny because Craig sends me a message in Portuguese.
Really?
DM. Yeah. It works in Portuguese as well. Craig entrar. Interesting. Next time I'm going to onboard Craig in Portuguese.
Yeah.
Is he going to record in Portuguese as well? Oh, now we have more people here. Hey, Claudia.
Hey, how's it going?
Okay, great. Omar, Robin.
Evening all.
Great, so let's just wait for a few more people to join. One thing, today, as I mentioned, I wanted to have much more like a Q&A. And if like there's no questions, we can just end the call earlier, no problem. But when asking questions, I'm going to try to remember that as well. It's good to state who is asking, because for people hearing the recording, it's hard to say, oh, who's talking like that. So remember to say your name. Even if we can see, remember that many people are going to listen to this and with the recording. And I'll try to, whenever I reference dates, I'll try to say the actual day, because this also gets lost somehow. All right. Oh, I should probably do this here as well. Okay. So the idea for this call was to basically give a more general sense of what's happening in the DAO, and open the space for people to ask questions. The idea is, well, basically we have two main agendas and things going on that would be interesting to get feedback from the broader community. I think the most interesting thing that is reaching out to the outside community as well is the incubation of RAW. So there's two sides to that. First is Fingerprints decision to incubate RAW or not. And we are going to do a snapshot vote, and the snapshot vote will be, people will be able to see the vote, see the options, which is interesting, even being outside of the DAO, to see how the decision is going to go. Also, from the standpoint of RAW, the idea is that we start operations and start to operate as a DAO, doing the votes, selecting the people who are going to join, checking the forms. We have already. Lucas, by the way, could you check how many applications we have in the form so far? and start making the decisions, like who should we onboard. Is this person going to not to onboard, like to select as a member? Is this person going to help the DAO? There's a credible case for that. Maybe do a follow-up. But the idea for us is to give a feedback to everybody, because it's normal. Like as you learn what the DAO does, you can say, okay, this I could help with this. Like there's different needs as the DAO grows, and I believe like people can always find a way to contribute. But other than that, I would like to open for questions, because I think it's like the best way to get a sense of what the questions are in like people's minds. If anyone has already questions, I would love to take them.
Thanks, Louise. This is Carlo Vendrua speaking. I can kick off the questions. We were talking in the chat the other day about whether the DAO is going to have a way to be able to sort of act nimbly to market opportunities, and this came up again. I'll give you the context of it. So I was helping a friend of mine into the NFT space, and this is a person whose work I very much believe in. I'm sure a lot of us have these scenarios. His name's Matthew Porter. His work's in the Metropolitan Museum of Modern Art, and MoMA's showing some of his stuff at the moment that Aperture published. So it's he's like he has an established career and a collector base. But it was an interesting case study, I think, because the the drop is tomorrow and the pre-sales are available. So I thought it might just be, rather than address him specifically, just use it as a case study as to whether the DAO can respond to these kind of timely opportunities, and or how they, what we might need to form in order for that to happen, because I can see more of them forthcoming.
Yeah, I think this is an important question for us to think about the process itself, less about the case at hand, but there's like the machine behind it, the whole process. The way we deal with that in Fingerprints is basically we have a curation committee, and the curation committee has the ability to act swiftly when an opportunity like this presents, and the committee judges it makes sense. In RAW, I think having some form of committee like this that has a budget and can act at the committee's discretion to be very fast is important. And why do I say that committee is better than simply asking everybody who is in the DAO? Because normally these opportunities, so let's say like, oh, you mentioned this, there's this artist, like this opportunity, this is going to drop tomorrow. In the committee, at least you can control a little bit more if people are acting on that before the DAO, so front running the DAO. If you have a DAO with like 250 people, it's basically impossible to get a sense if people are going to try to front run that opportunity or not. So I think it's important in any chance of front running, I think it's important to have a committee for that. So the process would be voting on a committee and letting the committee decide. But I don't know if you think there should be a different process, if there's some unintended consequence of this that could happen. It's important for us to think, because if we find a better solution, it's good for both DAOs. So like everybody's kind of learning what's the best way to approach this. Do you have any feedback on that?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, Louise. I think I'd be interested in discussing more how that committee might form, because obviously we're all, I guess, personally involved in this because it's a very peer-to-peer space. So there's obviously going to be bias.
Exactly. Yeah.
We don't want to be collecting our own work, for example. So I think, we just need to be mindful of how that's established. But I think I can't imagine a better way to act nimbly. I think it just needs some an outline. Yeah.
Yeah, and also clear rules on what, for example, committee members can do or not. This is something Hans mentioned. So, like, it has to be very specific in saying, okay, like as a committee members, if like a work is being considered, you cannot act on it. We have some guidelines like this thought for fingerprints that Sam was kind enough to put together. But it's we should also like think if this applies to photography, because maybe there's like this idea of pre-sale, like it's more common in photography. So maybe we should address that as well and deal with the issues as they go, trying to improve the process. Don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. I think it's a good first step, and I imagine there's some. I mean, Shane, I imagine you have some thoughts on this as well, because you're sort of familiar with the that pre-sale landscape as well, and how it might differ from other NFT spaces.
Oh, hey everyone. Sorry, I joined a little bit late, and I'm also driving right now, so I missed a good chunk of the beginning of that, but I'm tuning in now.
Sorry to put you on the spot, mate. But yeah,
On the
Louise,
road.
I think you've put us on the right track at any rate.
Okay, so do
All
we
right,
have
so
just a quick one? Do we sort of already have a timeline of when the DAO is going to launch?
So the idea is that the token contract is ready. We just need to decide on exactly what's going to be like the deployer for the token contract. Decide on the vault structure and everything, like more like infrastructure technical thing. And I think we should be ready to launch, at least with the narrow group next week, since we're also going to have a decision from fingerprints, and then we can also start. As I saw some people asking in general, like, if we're going to have feedback on this. And I'm sorry, you could have been doing a better job on being more responsible with this. But the idea is to as I mentioned, give feedback to everybody, and start onboarding the people that we think make sense for the DAO at this time. Once the initial DAO is formed, we also have to decide on a process for that. We are in the middle of doing something in fingerprints that I think it's very interesting to share with the larger community. That is admissions committee. So the idea is for us to have a process for onboarding people more seamless. Right now, you have to buy OTC prints, and like anyone can join in that sense. So the idea is to make easier for people to understand what's the value proposition for the people joining the DAO, and trying to make it easier for members that can really add value to the DAO, because they can contribute time, they can contribute some ability that they have, and not purely because they have more capital than others. So we're thinking about different tracks for that. So and for RAW, I think that's going to be similar. But we are going to have more details as we form the DAO and more is published. Any other questions?
Hi, it's Claudia Pollock here. I'm just trying to wrap my head around DAOs. This is all still very new to me. And I've been doing some reading just on ethereum.org. And I was just wondering if you, Louise, or anyone else in this room here have any resources to share, or like off the top of their head, remember any kind of like articles or information about like getting into DAOs and just like a general overview of like how they work and the organization and that sort of thing.
I can share some stuff. There's a couple articles, I think, by Cooper Trupo, that are very good, and that explain like which are the main DAOs, how they work in general. We also have the material from Fingerprints, which I could probably share with you if you'd like, on how we work.
Yeah, if you could just DM that to me, I'd really appreciate it. I'm very much a reader. That's how I learn. Thank you.
No, you can. Please send on general. I think more people would be definitely interested.
All right, I'll see if I can find anything there.
Great, but this is also something. It's a lot of learning by doing as well. Like you see exactly how we're organized. Is that as you saw, like we're still taking very early decisions. So there's no like it's still very flexible in the way it works. So we're trying to find the best way to make it work. Like there's no definitive way of how that works, but there's some good practices already, and I think that's what shows in the article Lucas mentioned.
Yeah, we have a general way of doing things inside Fingerprints, but we're always iterating with it, and we're always trying to learn from other DAOs as well. We understand that there's a few DAOs in the space which are older, larger, and perhaps better run than ours, and so we're constantly trying to figure out a better way to do things, better way to do compensation, voting, all sorts of things, governance, and which are the better channels, all that sort of thing. It's all quite new and very iterative as well, so constantly changing.
And there's some good discussion going on in Notion right now. If you haven't read it, I believe it's public. Anyone can see it. Is that correct, Lucas? That it is public?
As of now, I think only members have had access to the link.
Okay.
But I think you could share the article if you'd like.
Okay. Yeah, I encourage members to hop on there and
Which
check out what
discussion are you referencing to?
I think he's talking about the admissions committee proposal.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we should share it as right now because it's still under a heavy discussion and changing. Maybe we could share it afterwards.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I strongly encourage members to check out what we're talking about. Just all over Notion as well. There's just some good stuff, and even just topics that you've laid out, Lucas, on there that don't have any discussion or details yet. It would be nice to hear people's opinions just broadly, so we could start filling in some blanks.
Yeah, can you please share that on the members lounge, Lucas?
Yeah.
The idea, the idea is to as like for some people. I'm trying to be mindful that this call has people from outside of Fingerprints as well. And like I understand that it's okay. Like I'm not getting the link that they're sending or something like this. Some discussions necessarily have to be like private, at least for members first, because it changes a lot, and you don't wanna. You have to have like input from everybody before like sharing something that like shows as the face of the DAO in some way. But I'm always guessing and second, thinking like how much we should make it public, everything, because getting input from the larger community is also very valuable. So I don't know. This is, by the way, one case we should discuss if we should make it public or not. Should we get like input from everybody or not? So it's a interesting case study as well.
Yeah, this one on the admissions committee, I think it's better to remain private because, I mean, not everything is public. So you're probably going to be missing some of the discussion and some of the context that's currently exclusive to DAO members. So I think it should be private for now.
Not sure. I remember some members. I think Amy once mentioned this. How would be much more interesting to be building fully in the open, even for those questions. I don't know. I'm not sure. Like this is necessarily like the best decision.
Yeah, I
I'd
mean,
love
I
to hear
personally
like some.
yeah, I mean, I personally like the idea of being open completely. And in fact, I was in favor of getting rid of the members lounge and just keeping general because I think building in the open is very important. But anything that can be front run has to be private. I believe.
And that's if that's the bar, like this would be the case of something being fully open, right?
Yeah, I mentioned that mostly
I agree with Dollar
because
in that sense.
I mentioned that it should be private mostly because people which aren't available, which can't see the private areas of the DAO, are probably going to be lacking some context. And as things change, they probably going to be missing part of the story. I don't mind this being public at all.
I see. But there's like it's interesting information. I think like most likely people who are going to take the time to go and read the proposal are people who are actually going to add something to the DAO. Like, and maybe we should get like their inputs as well.
Perhaps.
Yeah, that's something I worry about. That the Discord can look a little dead if you're not in the members lounge. There's a lot going on behind the scenes that really isn't pertinent to just members. It could be open, and I think that there's an issue with a lot of gatekeeping in DAOs right now and NFTs in general, and I'd like us to kind of go against that if we can, just because it is really spectacular. Just built what we're building and what's able to be seen behind the closed doors, and it seems like if we could open that up, it really would include a lot of it would bring new members. It would show them what exactly we're doing and how they can contribute.
Should we run this as experiments? Because like one thing I learned actually yesterday in a call with Alex from FWB, the Friends with Benefits DAO. He mentioned something about being reversible or irreversible decision. This is the kind of decision that if it goes wrong, we can revert. So I don't think it would be like too bad if we just share this in general and use this as a case study. Don't you think?
Could we open up Avid lines as well to the public? I think that'd be interesting for people to, maybe not to the public, but definitely to all the members, and then maybe the public as well. I think it'd be interesting for people to see how exactly that project got off the floor.
Avid Lines is open.
Oh, great! Yeah, I'm unable to see
the project's channel you're talking about. I think it's open.
Yes, exactly. Okay, awesome. Yeah, I knew there was some discussion about that, but I didn't know.
I think Dollar is mentioning like the RE's projects.
Oh, okay.
Yes, yes, exactly.
How we produced Avid Lines. I think this I would rather discuss with Aris first.
Yes.
Just but I'm in favor as well, for people to see how that came about. It's a great case study. I would love people to use that, learn from that, use it elsewhere. It's great. Yeah, I agree. But we would need to ask him first.
I liked Dollar suggestion of getting rid of the members lounge and just having general be the members lounge. I think that could work.
Any I know we took like a big detour here, but I found this whole discussion very interesting. And by the way, I think we should maybe publish the document we were mentioning
All right.
in general. Yeah, like the
Okay, I'll do it.
and,
Let's see.
and it would be great to get input from like a broader group of people, like everybody who's listening to this. Other questions? Okay, so if there are any other questions, I think we can end the call. So for people who joined the call, mostly for RAW and regarding RAW's launch, just recapping this, we are going to have the initial formation for the DAO this week. And next week, the DAO forms, the tokens distribute, and as Fingerprints has a decision on incubation and the incubation model. We're going to start checking for analyzing the forms and deciding and voting on who should join RAW and in phase 1. I encourage you, if you haven't filled the form and you want to participate, please fill the form. You can send the form again in general. And if you have any questions listening to this recording, and please do follow up. It's important for us. And next time we wanted to have some other questions like beforehand, and a list of questions for people for us to address in these calls.
Yes, I'd also like to mention that the ongoing admissions committee proposal is a very, very important proposal, and that we'd like to get as much feedback as we possibly can. This is going to probably change the way the composition of it has the potential to change the composition of our membership, and that is basically the soul of the community. And so we got to make sure we get this right, and getting input from everybody is going to be great. It's going to help a lot.
I just jump in with
second.
something. Sorry, just a question or perhaps just food for thought. Thinking about the curation model with Fingerprints, we sort of have this mandate of stuff that's particularly unique. So on-chain, generative, first of its kind. I think with photography, there's going to be more ambiguity there in terms of what sets a high bar and what sets a standard. I don't know if there's been discussion about this yet or not. If so, definitely curious to hear. If not, I think it's something that we will need to discuss. It will possibly get quite interesting where with photography, it's perhaps subjectivity comes into it a lot more than with the on-chain generative stuff where you have a historical timestamp that maybe marks the significance of something.
I can address that a little bit if you want. This is Alejandro up here. There are very specific markers of what photography is and the potential of like historical pieces and cultural pieces. And this is something that I've addressed very much with Luis and with other members of the DAO. There is a track record of what is valuable as a photography. So we are not reinventing the wheel here. There are markers, there are people, there is information already out there that we can source. And some of the DAO members are, people who have worked in curation in photography and museum levels and in nonprofit levels. So I think we have a good amount of knowledge and people who can really help us curate and do a healthy collection and not just, be jumping around all over the place, but actually look for quality and historical pieces that either have existed prior to the NFT space, or images that are being produced for the NFT space. So I think it's the knowledge is there, and we just need to talk about it. But yeah, I'm pretty confident that we have the opportunity to collect because we have the knowledge and we have a group of people who have that knowledge.
That's
Yeah,
great clarity on that. Yeah, thank you.
Hey, Alejandro, this is Carla again. I think I agree 100%. And I think also people should feel courageous about bringing forward projects that are non-traditional to the medium as we know it as well. Things that are photography that is perhaps dynamic to the blockchain. I think that there's probably going to be a lot of projects that push things forward in those areas, and they may come from people that we might not be looking at, coming from a more traditional art world.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think this is the kind of discussion. It's going to be very interesting to see how it develops inside the DAO. As Alejandro has mentioned before, and I think it's very correct in that sense, is there's, for the work that is already out there, basically there's knowledge, like not necessarily for me because I'm not a specialist, but like there's knowledge of what's good and what's not great, let's say. But I'm really looking forward also to see the work that is minted and produced for this new medium. And this is something some photographers that are already in the DAO are doing, which is awesome. And how the DAO can be an actor in that process as well. So maybe commissions or something like this. But I'm very much looking forward to see what's the next chapter after we finish collecting all the previous stuff, like almost like the archaeological process of putting the stuff that is analog onto the blockchain. Like what happens next, and what's the kind of work that is produced for this new medium. I'm really excited to see what that is going to look like.
Yeah, and I wouldn't. Hello, I'm Fernando here, Fernando Gallegos. And I wouldn't worry a lot about finding new work or different forms of work. I think the history of photography itself is the history of the artists adapting to new technologies of the medium. And this is just another one of those stages, and I think it's very exciting to be in here. I think we will know when we see something that's pushing the medium of photography in the right way.
I feel that sort of a recurring theme inside of fingerprints curation is what is sort of made possible by the medium that wasn't possible before. And I have no idea what that means for photography, but I think that could be a cool guideline for us.
Yeah, I see that is a very simple and very, very sophisticated way to mark the collection and the curation. We will have to figure out, and that is the challenge. I think all of us photographers are, and this is, I think, one of the interesting things of the RAW DAO is that collectors as yourselves and artists, we're having this dialogue as we go. I think all of us here are asking the question: what is there is if there is actually native photography that is exclusively for the NFT space? And I don't think that anybody has that answer to this moment. We can play the games of commissioning, producing work that exists first in the NFT space, but per se, something that is photographic and that is in some way native to the NFT space. I think we're still in diapers in that. I mean, I think you guys collected something called Salt that references photography, but in the end, it is a moving image. So
Yes.
so yeah, exactly. So it starts with photography, but in the end, it's not photography, and that's fine. But as photography per se, as a still image, this is the big question. I think all of us, as photographers, being part of the RAW DAO, we're asking, we're looking for that what is native photography in the NFT space, and I'm excited to find it. But I don't know if it's going to happen immediately.
I love this conversation. I just want to say, I mean, I think it's a fascinating one that exists within the art world already, right? Where photography has always kind of tried so intensely to carve a space for itself. And then at the same time, there's this moment of many, many artists that work in a interdisciplinary fashion where their work might be photographic in some way, but sculptural in another, or they're working with new media and their historical reference points are photographic. But yeah, I think these are important conversations for Rod to figure out, what are the threads of collecting that are important? There's a tradition of photography, there's a history of photography that already exists, and some of that work that's important to that history of photography, or at least contemporary photography, is beginning to enter the NFT space. And so obviously those, as they emerge, are going to be important, but what are the photographic projects that are pushing the language of the medium itself, or pushing the possibilities of the medium of photography itself? These are what are exciting within the art world, or at least for me, the things that I get excited about. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how RAW can play a role in that. And I think we're still, as others have said, very, very early in seeing work that is made for the NFT space itself as a medium with photography. Anyway, and maybe I can hint at this because we've got some fun news, but we're working with Penelope Umbrico on a really amazing project that'll launch next Thursday, and it'll be something that lives a little bit at the intersection of a generative art practice and photography. And to me, it's so exciting because I think there can be so many more projects like that as we have more of a timeline ahead of us.
Hey, this is Omar here. Oh, I'm sorry, you were not done?
No, all good.
Oh, okay. Just like I didn't know if that's some interference or something. I want to make sure that I wasn't talking over you. This is Omar Robles, by the way. So I would like to, from the curation side, if at some point those parameters could be also shared with the broader community of the DAO, because I think one of the things that I fear that could happen is that the work that ends up being collected, because there's a smaller community making those decisions, that it might end up being kind of one-sided or just very academic work that only represents maybe one spectrum of what photography could be. And I understand that there is contemporary photography and that's one part of what could be fine art photography or photography that sets a bar, but there's a broader spectrum of photography. And I just fear that then it ends up sending just a signal that only academic work or very a very specific type of work is the only thing that it ends up being, and being the signal of what should be collected. I don't know if I'm making myself clear.
Yeah, I think you're correct in that sense, especially uh, when you mention the idea of it's basically open sourcing the parameters or the decision in some way. So this is something we in Fingerprints are trying to do better now, like both in making clearer the idea on what we're trying to collect or not, and also showing that the decisions we made, like, oh, okay, we decided not to collect this, we decided to collect this because of this and this, because it makes easier for people to get on the same page in that sense. And also, like the risk you mentioned, if you want to criticize, I say, okay, but this, we shouldn't be doing like, we shouldn't have like this rule or something like this. It makes it easier if the decision is made in the open. So not in the open, but after the fact open, because we can say, okay, that parameter makes no sense, for example, or something like this. So I think we can try to mitigate this issue with the process.
And I mean, if you look at museums or institutions, of course, they tackle this as well in terms of thinking through all the different varieties of, like within a photography department, for example, the diverse work from blue chip artists and artists that are, you know, well established or late career to mid career artists. And then many museums have amazing programs for, you know, what you might call emerging artists or early career artists. And those might be artists that don't have as much of a demonstrated track record in their career, their practice, but they have a really promising vision and voice with photography. So I think as long as there's a sense of diversity to what the medium of photography means, and then collecting across what you might call like career points, or where various artists are at in their work and their practice in terms of this like proof of work conversation that has come up before, then you kind of hit all the marks, because you build the blue chip works into your collection that are going to be historical markers within this space, and then you're also actively paying attention and being on the pulse of the emerging voices that are coming into the space.
I agree with you, Shane, and to some degree, what I don't know who mentioned the premise of how Fingerprints collects. Those are the premises. Those are the curatorial premises that are placed in museum collections and in private collections to help orient to where the ship is going. And though I do understand that at least Louise's proposal is to be as broad as possible, there will have to be some kind of understanding of how parameters are put in place and enforced in order for the DAO to have a coherent collection, or not. I mean, that is something that, you know, I've kind of learned from Luis, that maybe it doesn't have to have that, and it will be completely organic. But as we've seen, I've worked in museums, Shane has worked in a private space, that usually ends up being a parameter has to be placed, because if not, then there's too many directions in which to go, and then the collection becomes complicated to have and to order. But you know, we can do whatever we want, but we need to be mindful that that has been how collections have been made.
Yeah, and I think to your point, the whole idea when I said that ideally this would be a much little bit more flexible or free, is that we want to make ourselves flexible at least now in the beginning to be able to explore different directions. But if this goes the way we expect it to go, and like photography becomes like a much larger market in NFTs, a lot of photographers onboarding, uh, it's it's going to be a practical matter that we have to be more focused. Like as we have like more let's say like arts coming into the market, like we have to be more focused, otherwise we're not curating. So like part of the curation process, like most of the curation process is saying no. So it's in a sense that that's going to, if we are successful and the space becomes bigger and like more exciting, we're going to say more no than we are saying in the beginning to a certain extent. And hopefully more to even higher quality stuff, because you want to kind of increase the quality of the collection over time as well.
Yeah, I think the good curation job is done by trying to striving for achieve this balance between being too restrictive or just too broad and making a sort of disconnected collection.
Yeah, building on this point, I had a question. This is Gio, if that's cool if I have.
Sure, go ahead.
Hey, yeah.
Like bringing it back to earlier when it was discussed that there are like collector committees. Has there been any experimentation in the Prints DAO around multiple collector committees or like sort of like sub DAOs or sort of like, I don't know, little checks and
Like
balances
competing
across maybe
committees.
the committee? Yeah.
Interesting idea. So we have never experimented something like this in Fingerprints. Mostly because I think there's a issue with scale. I don't know if we had like two separate committees. How would that work? But this is a very interesting idea. Like you could have like maybe like something like not necessarily competing, but in a way like sub DAOs. But like maybe for photography, that's also a possibility, because like the whole idea behind creating RAW as a separate DAO was because like photography is so far away from our main thesis and collection. It has to be something and we have a different job to do here in a certain extent. Like we have to onboard the people, we have the photographers for being the founders for this, so it had to be like a separate DAO. So the incubation model was decided, but interesting if we had something inside RAW, and let's say I'm going to give a stupid example here, but like we have a one sub DAO that only focus on like adventure or nature, and the other focus on, I don't know, portraits. It's like a stupid example for like on purpose, but like a different set of curation and committees, not necessarily competing, but like with different mandates of sorts. Is that what you suggested?
Yeah, that's right, more or less. Because you were saying that there's you would give sort of like free reign to this sort of committee, and like the more committees that would have free reign to sort of explore different like subgenres, the better. Unless like as long as they're consistent with whatever the like overall goal is for, let's say, RAW, like whatever they're trying to collect. But yeah, I just feel like that's one way to sort of like decentralize that like single sort of like decision collective of like that committee. But yeah, one way to.
Yeah, this is a great idea, by the way. Really worth exploring something like this.
I think it could work very well for RAW, since it's a broader, a more flexible sort of mandate. like collect photography, for instance, and then you could have sub DAOs, one for typological, one for nature, one for landscape or whatever. That's a good idea. Inside of Fingerprints, we did discuss doing this sort of lower tier of collection, right, Luis? But we never got around to it.
Yeah, no. In Fingerprints, we don't have something like this. But it would be interesting to get like feedback from the photographers. Do you think that something like this would work?
I really like, this is Omar, Omar Robles. I definitely like the idea because again, the problem, or not the problem, but let's say the thing, for lack of a better word, with photography is that there's many different types of photography. And having only one committee making decisions of something that is so broad in terms of the spectrum of what photography offers can cause that risk of then just having just one type of work being collected, where maybe that committee is not all knowledgeable on maybe portrait or fashion photography or photojournalist photography, and each one of those categories of photographies can offer a lot of richness into the general collection. And I think if it's divided in subcommittees like that, where experts in each one of those fields can be useful into what sets the standard, I think it could enrich the collection into different different types of photography for sure.
Yeah, I agree with Omar. This is Carlo speaking. I think it's a great idea. I think it could end up catalyzing a slightly scattered collection, compared to a single committee. But I think maybe that's not a bad thing. We're not a museum, and I think that the democratic nature of a DAO is such that maybe that collection should have a broader representation. I do have one question, just speaking of broad strokes. Is the DAO strictly interested in photography versus moving image, or work that perhaps crosses the boundary between the two? I imagine as people start creating work that's more dynamic with the blockchain, we might find different kinds of work are getting created. Are we interested? I think salt is an example, right? Are we interested really in sticking to photography in the traditional sense of the term?
I think it's interesting that this idea was mentioned. In some ways, it's strange to talk about like the genre of different types of images, meaning like portraits or landscapes or things like that. But to speak of genres of photography, meaning like, say, art photography or photojournalism, or maybe some sort of genre that is like innovation within photography, sort of speaking to that idea of what is at the edge of photographic, whether it becomes sculptural or three-dimensional or in video or film, etc. These types of genres can be really interesting as long as the folks within the committees had a certain level of expertise about those genres. But to imagine the committees be focused on something like portraits or something like landscapes is too it's like it's a type of image. It's not a genre of like photographic art, for example.
Can I mention something? I mean, this is all really exciting, and it sounds like a solution to move forward, but we should be mindful that that is exactly the opposite that what museums are doing today. They are deleting genres and they are mixing absolutely everything together because it's art, it's not genres. So we need to be careful that we're supposed to be the new space and we're going backwards instead of forward. So be mindful of that.
100%.
I think maybe this is a way to do exactly that.
Yeah, so like if you have committees that are sort of like focused in different, like just calling them genres, it's not necessarily that like the DAO won't collect a broad array of different types of photographs. It's just that you sort of have these experts that are like deeper in the weeds and possibly find like talent and good projects like a lot earlier than like, you know, once it hits, I don't know, something like where like Drift has at this point, like his style and photos, you know, is selling for like dozens of ETH right now. Meanwhile, you know, that wasn't the case a month or 2 months ago. Whereas if like you had someone from a committee like focused on that particular type of photograph, you know, maybe someone like that gets found and collected like a lot sooner, and then it's part of this sort of like ocean of photographs, you know, in.
Hey, it's Chadwick, by the way. I don't know if you guys can hear me. I've been having trouble trying to speak in and nobody's been hearing me. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, good. If you guys don't mind, I wouldn't mind going back just a little bit to the idea of multiple curation or curator kind of.
And so
groups
I think like the more general idea of having not necessarily competing, but different views.
Hey, Luis,
Hey,
can you hear me? Chadwick was
yeah.
talking. Maybe you didn't listen. He was in the middle of a sentence.
Oh, sorry, I didn't.
No
hear.
problem. No problem. I was just wondering if we could go back to the idea of kind of like the acquisition committees. I think it's a great idea for us to look into, especially if we want to be nimble, is that we would have small groups, maybe pockets of 5. I think it's also important that maybe those specialize in different groups. I agree with Alejandro 100% that, you know, it's like right now, my feeling is that we want to kind of like protect our craft. So I get a little nervous when we start talking about video and all of those other kind of components, but I think that's another part of a discussion. I'm totally fine with like us putting a committee for kind of experimental photography, you know, but I do think it would be good for us to kind of like have a couple of different groups that really specialize in what it is that they specialize in, and also having diversity within those kind of groups where we don't just have, you know, 5 photographers making decisions or 5 investors making decisions, or, you know, I think it's like making sure that we have a proper you know, historian on that can kind of bring context to certain pieces and all of those components. But I do love the idea of having pods of people that could potentially be acting on our behalf, acquiring work, because I think that it's going to ultimately give us a stronger and much diverse collection. But also agreeing with Alex that we have to be very careful in this whole process.
One solution that a lot of sorry, I was just going to point out.
I'm just going to point out that I love this name, pods. Like it would be a great way to guarantee like more nimble and like kind of subcommittees. But like interesting. Thanks for putting that out.
Yeah, I was going to say within the like institutional context, sometimes that's called like an advisory committee, right? Like you might have various groups that advise or put forward towards, say, a selections committee, various options or ideas. And then that core selection committee, which would be made up of a diverse group of individuals who have various expertise, would make the final decisions. So that's another way to think about it too, is like various advisory committees that put forward ideas towards a diverse selection committee.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I'd say that my main gut feeling is that perhaps we shouldn't begin the DAO by firing on all cylinders and having all sorts of committees. This is a thing that I've seen in other DAOs where it starts a little bit centralized, but it decentralizes as time goes on. And then perhaps we could start with maybe 1 or 2 committees and then sort of expand as time passes. That way we could perhaps arrange a backbone collection like we have one in Fingerprints, and then we start doing all sorts of different things as more people get involved and the DAO grows.
It definitely makes sense, especially as far as making sure you have a strong foundation upon which to build further out. But another thing has like Fingerprints experimented with like incentives for like people to sort of like scout, and then sort of let's say something did get purchased, it would get, that person or group would get some type of like incentive or reward for like that find or success.
I think something that it's important also to make clear in a way is that it's not only because one particular work of art is like the price is higher now in some sense, it's better. So I think part of the curation process and everything that comes attached to this, like membership, the participation, is for us to express a view that is not necessarily like the view of the market. So, for example, going back to example of the what we built with Fingerprints. So we've said no to stuff that we would have said no regardless, to stuff that went up like a lot. So it's not only because something went up that it makes sense for us to collect. In that sense, it's a little bit different from like if you only see from the pure investment perspective. But this is because to build a collection and to build a brand, this is all like this is more valuable than in the DAO itself. Like it's all more valuable than even the collection because it has this first this strong signal and of like quality stuff, and the idea that it can it doesn't have to be tied necessarily to performance in the market. Of course, you cannot like completely dissociate from performance in the market, or otherwise it shows, and it shows that your curation is probably not very good. But we don't have to necessarily pursue every single opportunity of stuff that rises in value, which is something could be counterintuitive, but once you see it happening, you say, okay, it kind of makes sense.
Hey, this is Cooper. I think that's a really good point, Luis, and not necessarily tied to like market performance, and the quality of the work is often dislocated from the value that the market currently is pricing stuff at. But just going back to what Chadwick and Carlo were talking about, and that Shane touched on with having pods of us in terms of just bringing a diversity of work to even more of like a more centralized curation board, like Luca said. I think I'm all about having like some diverse groups kind of separated to be able to delegate or present different types of work, and maybe we have more loose genres based on what our what our expertise is in terms of identifying different photography as artists. But I like this concept.
Yeah, if this is hi everyone, it's Mabot. I just wanted to add and to the same point. I think there's also precedent that we can learn from other DAOs out there that I think implementing a little bit of what we're already mentioning. So this idea of sub DAOs or sub interest committees or groups, I think it's going to be fundamental to our long-term success, right? So if we look at other DAOs like YGG, like Yield Guild Games, right? Like they have a very clear North Star, right? They focus and invest in games, yield, play to earn games, right? And then under that, based on the community's interests, people have said, well, listen, I love esports. And then they're going to go ahead and kind of create a specialty in esports, or I like this type of game. I think for us, like Luis said, if we have a very clear North Star that the centralized curation committee has very clear, if somebody raises their hand and says, listen, I'm really into audio and I really want to, really lead in the audio space, and that we know that audio is going to be big for art, what does that mean? Then I think we should encourage and support that. The same way we're doing that with photography now, maybe we do it with poetry or written work on the chain. So like, I think encouraging that but as long as it follows the North Star, I think it's going to help us create a really diversified and more valuable and interesting organization in the long term. And I think we can look at other DAOs that have done similar things and maybe learn what's worked and what hasn't worked, and then bring those learnings to the group as well.
Hey, this is Omar, and I think Omar, I have to specify Omar Robles because I know there's we have another Omar. But I think the reason why I also mentioned that I think it's important to have those criteria transparent to the community at large is because at the end of the day that those going to be our values, right, as a community. And I think we all want to make sure that we abide by those values, meaning, you know, that being in the DAO, I want to make sure that whatever criteria it's chosen, it's something that myself as an individual I can also stand by. And I'm thinking that other people are gonna, you know, appreciate that as well.
Agree. Okay, so if there are no more questions, I unfortunately have to jump now because I'm already late for next one. So that was great. So my idea, and of course, feel free to continue this. But just wanted to wrap it up on my side. My idea is to first to do this every week. So every week we have a call like this, like open to everybody, and we are understanding like what's the better timing. Maybe try to explore a few different times. But the idea is to try to do more stuff in the open. I think like we already have like the discussion we were having right now, like just came from Geo actually, who mentioned this, just popped up, and if we we're not doing this in the open, this discussion wouldn't even have started. So I really appreciate the fact that people are jumping in and contribute. It already like brings value to the DAO, I'd say, for sure, and to the experience of building DAOs in more in general.
Yeah, cheers, man. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Luis.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Luis. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.